Have you ever found out that something you had been paying for, reliably every month for years, was not actually yours to pay for? Not a scam, not an accident, a deliberate arrangement that someone had maintained carefully and knowingly because it was profitable and because they had correctly calculated that you would never look closely enough to find it. I found it because of a water heater. Specifically because a water heater broke in February 2022, and the repair technician who came to fix it spent 11 minutes in my utility closet and then came to find me in the kitchen and said, "Ma'am, I need to ask you something. Is this unit registered with the city?" I said, "I assume so. I've been renting it for 7 years." He looked at me with an expression I did not immediately understand. Then he said, "There's no unit number on any of the permitted electrical or plumbing fixtures in this space. According to the building permit records I have access to, this floor of the building is listed as commercial storage." I stared at him. "I think," he said carefully, "you might want to call the city." My name is Priya, and this is the story of 7 years of rent paid for an apartment that, according to the city of Chicago, did not exist. Finding an affordable apartment in Chicago in 2015 was an exercise in managed disappointment. I was 27, working as a graphic designer at a mid-sized agency, earning $52,000 a year, which sounds reasonable until you try to rent a one-bedroom in any neighborhood you actually want to live in. I had spent 4 weekends looking at places that were either at the edge of my budget and depressing, or within my budget and actually depressing. The listing for Unit 4C at 2811 North Halsted appeared on a Tuesday evening. 1 bedroom, updated kitchen, in-unit laundry, $1,050 a month. The neighborhood was Lakeview, not the most expensive pocket, but solidly livable. The photos looked real, not staged. I called the number on the listing within 20 minutes. The landlord's name was Frank Del Vecchio. He was in his late 50s, friendly in a tired, businesslike way, and met me at the building the following afternoon for a showing. The unit was on the 4th floor. Actually, a partial 4th floor, he explained. A conversion that had been done years ago when the top of the building was reconfigured. It looked like an apartment. It had a kitchen, a living room, a bedroom, a bathroom, and a utility closet. It had windows. It had its own entrance from the stairwell. I signed a lease. I paid first month, last month, and security deposit. $3,150 total. I moved in on March 1st, 2015. For 7 years, I paid $1,050 a month, every month, on time, directly to Frank Del Vecchio via personal check, because he had told me he preferred checks to electronic transfers, and I had never questioned this. 7 years. $88,200 in rent for an apartment that the city of Chicago classified as commercial storage space. The water heater failing was not, in retrospect, surprising. It had been making a sound for months, a low, intermittent rattling that I had mentioned to Frank twice and that he had twice told me he would look into. When I finally called a repair service myself and paid for it directly, intending to deduct it from rent as Illinois tenant law permitted, the technician's 11 minutes in my utility closet changed everything. After he left, I sat in my kitchen for a long time. Then I looked up the address on the City of Chicago's building permit database. It was publicly available. I had simply never had reason to look at it before. 2811 North Halsted. 4 floors listed. Ground floor, commercial retail. Second floor, 4 residential units, all permitted. Third floor, 4 residential units, all permitted. Fourth floor, listed as storage conversion, commercial classification, no residential permits. I looked at this for a long time. Then I searched for my unit number, 4C, in the city's rental registration database, which Chicago required all landlords to maintain. Unit 4C at 2811 North Halsted did not appear in the database. No unit on the 4th floor appeared in the database. I looked at the lease I had signed in 2015. I had not read it as carefully as I should have, but rereading it now, I noticed something I had absorbed without registering. The lease identified the property as 4th floor space, 2811 North Halsted, not as Unit 4C. The unit designation appeared on my mailbox, on the buzzer panel, and in my own head, but not in the legal document I had signed. Frank Del Vecchio had been renting me a storage space for 7 years. My attorney's name was James Whitfield. He was a tenants' rights specialist in Chicago with 20 years of experience, and the specific, contained energy of someone who has seen most things and is rarely surprised by them. He was not surprised by my situation. He told me that unpermitted residential units, sometimes called ghost apartments, were not uncommon in Chicago, particularly in older buildings where upper floors had been converted over decades without proper permitting. What was less common, he said, was a landlord maintaining one consistently for 7 years with a single tenant. Most of these situations are shorter term, he said. Turnover creates risk of discovery. Your landlord had a very reliable, very quiet tenant who paid on time and never caused problems. From his perspective, you were the ideal occupant for an off-the-books unit. I thought about 7 years of on-time checks, of never missing a payment, of being, as Frank had once told me, the best tenant I've got. What are my options? I asked. James outlined them. Option 1. The city could be notified of the unpermitted unit. This would trigger an inspection and likely result in Frank being ordered to either properly permit the space or vacate it. I would be protected from retaliatory eviction under Illinois law during this process. Option 2. I could pursue a civil claim against Frank for the rent paid, all or a portion of it, on the grounds that he had collected payment for a unit he was not legally authorized to rent. Option 3. Both. What do you want? James asked. I thought about $88,200 paid over 7 years for an apartment that legally did not exist. Both, I said. I want to pause here because I know some of you are wondering why I didn't just leave. Why not find a new apartment, cut my losses, move on? I've asked myself this. The honest answer is complicated. Part of it was practical. I had built a life in that apartment. My studio was set up exactly how I needed it. I worked from home 3 days a week. But part of it was something else, something that took me a while to name. What Frank Del Vecchio had done was not an accident. It was not an oversight. He had knowingly rented me a space he had no right to rent, collected my money for 7 years, and when I discovered it, his first response was to tell me it was a technicality. That word, technicality, as if the legal existence of my home was a minor administrative detail. I was not going to let that be a technicality. The city inspection happened 3 weeks after James filed the complaint. The inspector, a woman named Officer Denise Park, spent 90 minutes in the building. She confirmed the 4th floor space had never been issued a residential certificate of occupancy. The electrical work was partially up to code, the plumbing was functional, but neither had been inspected or permitted for residential use. She also found, in the course of her inspection, that Frank Del Vecchio had not registered any unit at 2811 North Halsted with the Chicago Residential Landlord-Tenant Ordinance Registry in over 4 years. Not just my unit, any unit. The registered tenants on the 2nd and 3rd floors were operating under leases that had technically lapsed in terms of city registration. Frank had not been complying with landlord registration requirements building-wide. He was issued violations on 7 counts. The fines alone were substantial. James filed the civil suit in April 2022. The claim was for recovery of rent paid for a unit that was not legally available for residential rental, the full $88,200, plus damages for the hazardous conditions created by unverified electrical and plumbing in an uninspected space. Frank's attorney initially pushed back hard. They argued that I had occupied the space willingly, that the conditions were habitable in practice, if not in permit, that I had suffered no demonstrable harm. James had a response to each of these. The willingness argument failed because I had not been informed of the permit status at the time of signing.
A tenant cannot consent to an illegal arrangement they are not told about. The habitability argument was undercut by the water heater, an appliance that had failed and, per the inspector's notes, had never been properly permitted or inspected, creating potential carbon monoxide risk that I had been living with for an indeterminate period. The harm argument was addressed by the $88,200 itself. The harm was the money.
I am still a graphic designer. I have also, in the past 2 years, become something of an unofficial resource for my friends when they have housing questions. I have walked 4 people through the Chicago permit database search. I have referred 2 people to James Whitfield. I have also started reading leases very carefully before I sign them. If you are renting anywhere, especially in an older building, especially in a converted space, especially anywhere that your unit number appears on a buzzer but not clearly in your legal documents, look up your address in your city's building permit database. It is free, it takes 10 minutes, and it might tell you something your landlord was counting on you never knowing. The water heater breaking was the best thing that happened to me in 2022. Some truths only come out when something stops working.